Danse. Danse kakyo. Okay. I'm going to pick up where we left off on New Year's. I'm just going to share this out on Facebook. Okay. All of my streams start with the same awkward 2 minutes while I push all the buttons and do all the things. Danse, Anin, Rixford, aha, Mananto. I don't know how to respond to that in Anishinaabe. What would be, somebody says, Anin. How do you respond to that? Aha, tapwe. Yeah. Tapwe. Though I'm trying to remember exactly where I ran into you specifically. Yep, that's right. Mia Sin. Teaching Lodge. Mia Sinanma. We'll let things get fired up for a couple minutes here. We're going to pick up where we left off on New Year's. Get a document open. I wonder if Jim is still running those lodges out there. Probably, hey, we haven't been back out that way in a little bit. Though I'm headed back to Edmonton this week. We've got our next session at Sweetgrass coming up next week. Let me see if I can pull up. Bear with me, I'm still getting organized here. We started this project with the Cree Literacy Network called Sweetgrass Stories, a 21st Century Perspective, and we're going to work on one of these stories tonight from the Bloomfield collection. We started on this on New Year's, just reading through some of these stories and take a little bit of a look at sometimes the grammar or the phrasing. It's just kind of a open study, but honestly, if there's anything anybody wants to chat about tonight, open to that also. And anyway, we're headed back to Sweetgrass next week, and we've got a collection of stories from West that we've started to put up on YouTube, and we'll continue to do so until we get to the end. It's been a couple weeks since I've put anything up just because I've been super busy. But you can find these, or if you Google for Sweetgrass Stories, a 21st Century Perspective. In 1925, a linguist by the name of Leonard Bloomfield went to Sweetgrass, Saskatchewan, and collected 1,800 pages of stories and published them in 2 books. There was actually a third unpublished book. But the first book in 1930, I think it was published through the Canadian National Museum something. I forget the name of it. I'm going to look that up because I keep forgetting. But it was called Sacred Stories of the Sweetgrass Cree. And then there was a second book published in 1934 through a different organization. Because Bloomfield had to fight just to get the one book published, as everybody was going into the Depression. And so they ended up publishing the second book, Plains Cree Texts, in 1934 through an American organization. These texts are all available freely online now through my website, kiano.net. You can find them under Bloomfield. If you go to kiano.net, go down to Bloomfield Online, you can find all of those there. But 100 years later, in 2025, we got the opportunity to work with Wes Fineday. Wes's great-grandfather, Fineday, was one of the original informants for Bloomfield. And we have those texts from Fineday as well. And so we've started this project called Sweetgrass Stories, a 21st Century Perspective, as almost like a continuation of those original texts, but also to put those texts into a contemporary context, I'll say. To sort of create a modern link to those texts. They're still here, they're still relevant. So we're going to work on one of those stories tonight. Mother Ducker says the sound is choppy. The sound is choppy. Hold on. I have this issue with TikTok sometimes. Do you have a second? Can you check the... Actually, I can check my TikTok too. See if it's something I can clear up on my end. Whoop. Give me a second. I'll see if I can. Kind of staticky. That's not good. Let's see if we can fix it. Is it? Are you on the Discord? I'm just going to, oh yeah, that's really weird. Yeah. What I'll do for the folks coming through on TikTok is I might drop this, I'll just drop the live and fire it back up and see if that makes a difference. It's kind of choppy on the TikTok. Can you check the Discord for me, if you got a sec? Let's just go check Facebook. Just when you think you have all of these issues worked out. Facebook sounds really good. Yeah, so I think it's just a TikTok issue. I'll drop the TikTok live and we'll fire up again. Is the Discord okay? Please stand by while we resolve our technical issues. Yeah, just let me know. From somewhere? Somewhere random? Too funny. Okay, so so if you're tuning in and curious, you can find those stories. There's a link in my profiles and whatnot to go check out those stories. But we started on this story, the birth of Wisagaichak and the origin of mankind on New Year's. And you can go find that. We started on that a week ago. We'll zip down to where we left off and we'll tie into that tonight. Let me just back up a tiny little bit as I forget where we are exactly. Because the story took a bit of a left turn in the middle. So the rolling head, I think, went into the river and that became Nameo. The boys wandered about, suffered many hardships. That was Wasage Hitak in his childhood. Okay, so then at one time, so we're in another story. An old man by a canoe. Wasage Hitak was taken. Do build a lodge for a Matotsan. Shall make my body accordingly. Sweat lodge was built. Okay, and then he shall take my son-in-law to such a place. Took him to an island. Thus spoke the old man, my dream guardian. I feed you this man. Ha ha. Mayo tate se. Okay, so some of these words are tricky, but we'll go anyway. Mayo tate se skisi dai. There's that really interesting dai ending, which I don't know this word. Say skisu maybe? Let's go see if we can find it. We're already starting off with a really tricky word. Say skisu. To enter the bush. And I'm not sure what that... It seems like that tai ending is interacting with the process of going in. Yeah, it's a complex word. We'll keep going though. Awaho skinigu kape muskistagut wagayusa ituaga wapiskistik. One of those ga wapiskistik. Sometimes tongue twisters like that. I want to look at this word. Muskistoil, maybe? Muskistoil. To rush, to charge, rush at someone or charge someone. Interesting. Tanse Charlene. Yeah. The sound is perfectly clear on Facebook. I think it was just a TikTok issue. I should really just double check quick and see... really quick and see if that got any better. Yes, of course that live has ended because I had to restart it. We'll just run that for a second. Seems better, Mother Ducker says. Yeah, okay, so see, there was an issue with the live. Okay, good. Glad to hear it's better. Let's keep going. Hey, kitty. Yeah. I wanted to talk about, maybe that's one of the things here. Kape muskistagut. I wonder if that's supposed to be ga. There's a few different, this could be one of the tricky things to learn, and I still work on this all the time. The difference between ga and ga, so we can talk about that a little bit. And this isn't going to be perfect science or anything. This is just sort of my impression of how the meaning or the semantics of these particular things. Now, you have to keep in mind for both of these, ga. Let's pick an example out of our story here. I don't want to grab this one because I'm not confident about that exact one, but let me see if I can find another example here. We'll talk about, and not this ga. It's kind of similar, but it's not the same. The thing about these, what would you even call them? Parts? Prefixes? They're not really words. Yeah, and seeing they aren't using ga, they're using geta. So this one's going to be the same. So that might be That's an advanced example. Bear with me while I find... Yeah, it's going to be ta or gitta, isn't it? Let's use that one. So, first of all, you will find that this ga, not the ga sound, but ga, it can be ga or ta or gitta, which is pretty common in these texts, or the way Wes says it all the time, giga. They all mean the same thing, and I've even seen, I've never heard this, but I've seen it written, ditta. These all mean the same thing. They're all variations of the same way of saying something. But I'm just going to use I'll just use these two for now. So the word we just found, Tametawagit, well, we'll just shorten that up. Tametawagit, to play with something. And we're talking about somebody specific. What can be tricky is that while this specific form, which they sometimes call the, what do they call that? They call it infinitive or something like that. Here, we'll jump over here and see, because they'll show it right here. I think they call it the infinitive, whatever that means. Yeah, infinitive. Ga, ta. So they show it in the Itoiwan dictionary. They show it both ways, with ga and ta. But there's actually other ways you can say this, and it is technically in the conjunct mode. But conjunct isn't just one. Conjunct is a few different that have a few different ways of doing things. And actually, we could back up there too. Let's talk about that for a second. So generally speaking, the conjunct mode is sort of anything that has the endings that are conjunct. So this ending here for me is what makes that conjunct. So you could say a metawagit, which is that person's plays with something. You can say ga metawagit, right? Or you can say ga metawagit, right? So these are all, for me, these are all in conjunct, but they're different kinds of conjunct. We'll come back to this one in a minute, and we'll talk about this one probably another time. I'm just going to focus on the difference between these two, because they sound similar when you run into them or when you see them, right? We might confuse this with ga metawagit when it's ga metawagit. And so a naive or simple way to describe this might be, and this to say to, like in this case, to play with something, right? And we're really talking about a person. So it's hard to just interpret this word on its own. But the other thing that makes this tricky is depending on the context. Depending on the words that are around this, either ga or ta or gitta. And again, these are all the same. Depending what's around them, the meaning can sort of be shaped a little bit. So a good example of that is, I would say this one here is for someone to play with something, if you were to translate this directly. But there are also contexts in which this could mean that person should. Let me pick an easier word, because this one's got a, let's use nigamo. Ganigamut, let's use that. So specifically, this form, we're talking about someone, the third person, for that one to sing. But again, that's not an accurate translation, because if you just said ganigamot, you might be saying that one is going to sing, right? Or you could say Bogoga nigamot. I don't know if you'd actually say that. Bogoga nigamot, that one has to sing. That one must sing. Trying to think of another example. I wonder if you could say Gi spin ganigamot. Would that make sense? If that one's going to sing? I don't know if you'd say that. What I'm trying to say is that there are a really basic or simple interpretation of that might be to. It sort of puts it in the future. Or it's sort of like, there's a fancy term for it called irrealis. I don't really know what that means. But it's like it hasn't happened or it's not currently happening. So it can be tricky because depending on what the context is, it doesn't just mean that. It can mean sort of different things. That's one of the things that can make it tricky. I'm trying to think of good examples and I can't. Let me see if I get your name right. We're going to jump to Ga right now. So, Musquahkis, hope I'm saying that right. Like something that will or may happen. I think so. It's like, in so many contexts, it means to, right? So the example is like, namiwitin. And I'll just use me as an example. Kanigamoyan. Which literally means, I like to sing. This is a simplistic interpretation. I like to sing. Right? So this is the part that means I like, and this part means to sing. But that means me, specifically. Nigamoyan, that's me. Right? Trying to think of another example. But it's usually in stories where I run into a context. This is a very simplistic one, but you'll run into a story or something where they'll use the ga or ta or gita, right? And then it doesn't really mean to. And that's the tricky part. Let's come back to it. Let's jump down to ga. And this one's, I don't want to say it's easier to explain, but I have more examples. Musquahki says, Musquahkis, like gatu tam, someone will do it. Gatu tak. Gato tak. So now we get into ga, right? So we're talking about ga. Let me just borrow this, put it there. And we'll just change it back to ga. This one's sort of to. This one is ga. This one's a little bit different in that it's generally either something that's happened or it represents something that is known, right? So in this case, if I just said Ga ni gamoyan, that could mean when I sing, or when I sang. This is where it gets tricky again, because again, these aren't just a fixed meaning. They are informed based on the context. Usually that's another word, or that's like the context of the maybe the sentence or the context that you're speaking about or operating within, if that makes sense, right? But it also doesn't always mean past tense. So Queen Bee says past tense, kind of, yes, depending on the context. Because in the context of a story, you could say "Gapit wait awa," that one came in, or when that one came in, right? So it can mean past tense, but it can also mean like which or that. For instance, an example of that might be "Ana napeo ka nigamot." Okay, or who, I guess, in this context, right? Say there's 3 men standing over there, and you asked me which one, and I said, "Ananapeo ga nigamot," the one who was singing. right? So in that case, it's not in the past tense. In that particular case, it could be something that's happening right now, right? Another example. Musqua ga wapiskisit. Could you say that? The bear that is white. So it's more like depends on a lot of contexts, and sometimes it'll be used with other words like ita, ite ga. Whoops. Ite ga. I'm trying to apia ite gapit, where that person is. So in this context, it means now where that person sits or where that person sat. Maybe you'd say. Yeah. Oh, hi. Hey, Mananto, Brandon. Yeah, no problem. Glad that was helpful. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that a bit. I don't know if I was helpful at all with this one. Ga. But I just wanted to talk about that these are different. Ga. And they both can have multiple interpretations or multiple meanings, sort of depending on the context in which you run into them. And I admit there's many contexts I run into them that I'm still like, that doesn't make sense to me, because my understanding is limited, and the context I'll run into it and it'll try to stretch my understanding of how you can use that word sometimes. Anyway, so we ran into one of those and I wanted to stop and talk about that for a minute. So let's jump back to where we were. I think we were on 58. So we did this. Yeah, we did this one last time. Ganipahau. Ganipahau chi oma e tetaman. Iteo wa. Namagagi nipahin. So there's ga again, but this is a different context. And this, when you have that gagi or tagi, usually means could, should. Well, in this context, it's the negative, so you can't. Namagagi nipahin ito. Ayis knista. Kapuwaganimtin ito. Imitin. It's interesting. Okay. We'll just keep going. I run into things every once in a while that make my brain go, why did they say it that way? And the language is just so fluid and sophisticated that I think there's lots of ways that you can say things. Oh, I can't see the right side of that paragraph. Oh, let me fix that. If you're on TikTok, there's a button in there somewhere where it'll switch your phone to, instead of a vertical view, a landscape view. But I will fix it. Tisqua. Okay. It's just so tiny on vertical, but I hope that helps anyway. If you switch to the other view, it'll be a little easier to read, I hope. Tapoi nipahe awa o skinigo. O stagwani o tinamoyo. Oh, tinamoyo. That's interesting. I want to look that up. Tisqua. That's a utinam. That's another one of those ones that I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say that. I think that's what they call a relational form, where he took that one's, like he took the head, ostagwani you, but it was because the head is in relation to the person. We'll keep going. Giwe tatao. Asis ko ohe. Giseyenua. Outdistanced. Interesting. Siskoil. Head off someone, get ahead of someone. Waskits nipi atipimo teo. Waskits. Keep running into words I just don't even know. On the surface. He walked along the surface of the water. Waskitsnipi. Interesting. Egi weta wageseyenu. Gawapa ta wagayos. So here's an instance where we run into ga. And in this case, it kind of means, I guess in the past. Oh yeah. Musquaquis says, took for them. Interesting. Interesting. And can I use that for me in some context? Like, could I say, nito, nit, ay, utane, nito, tinamwan, nito, tinamwan. Can I say that? Would that make sense? That's really interesting. So there's that, in this context, egi wait, as he got home, or when he got home, or when he went home, I guess. It says over here, went home. Gawapata. He saw the head of the bear. In this context, it doesn't really mean... It's sort of in the past, but it's not really. It's just like happened, I guess. So it doesn't really have an interpretation. Like God doesn't mean its own thing. In this case, it doesn't mean when or where or like who, which, that. It can mean those things, but in this context, it's just like an event in the story. Does that make sense? Musquaquis says, nito tinamwa sun. That's interesting. Super interesting. Queen Bee, in the near past. In the near past. I've heard that before too. That's interesting. But if the story, is it in the near, not in the near past, relevant to, relative to now? Because this story happened a long time ago. Anyway, I'll keep thinking about it. Hi, Neil, Tanse. I think that one is supposed to be Otenamuel. That would make sense, actually. Otenamuel. These can have typos in them. Musquaquis says, we use in my community to say we bought something. Nitot namason. Nitot namason would make sense. I think. That's right, we'll keep going. Kawapa tak. Wagayo sustagwan. Eagoteik. Otesquate meek. It was hanging there. Right? Isn't that interesting how the conjunct egi wait in the beginning sort of means when, but or as, I guess, as he went home. But you wouldn't really interpret this as like he saw the bear head. I guess you could say as it was hanging on the door. But he saw the bear head hanging on the door. It's just interesting, again, depending on where it is in the sentence, in the context, the meaning changes a bit. I guess that happens with pretty much all of the stuff in any of the different conjunct, subjunct, or whatever. Depending where they are, depending the context that's surrounding them, the meaning can shift a little bit, I guess. Yeah. Otenam, that one took something. Otenamoil, that one took something for someone. Otenamoil. Would it be for or from? How would you say he took it from them? So I would think that would be take it for them, buy something for them. Interesting. That's right. Let's keep going. 4 people. Queen Bee says 4 people, plural. 4. I guess it could be 4 people. Yeah, that makes sense. But what if you took it just for one person specifically, would you be able to distinguish between Nitot Namawao? I took it for. Oh, I guess if it's in that Namaweo, it could be one person or multiple people. Does that make sense? For them? Yeah. But if it was me and I took it for someone, I could tell the difference, right? Nitot Namawao would be just like I took it for one person. Nitot Namawawak, I took it for them. But if it's the third person we're talking about, then we would have to clarify if it mattered. Probably doesn't matter. All right. Magawi kasi nu. Mawi ka teo opawaga na. Inipayamit. Bewailed. What does that mean? Bewailed. Cries out over someone. All right, Mustas. Thanks for stopping in. Mawikateo. Mawikateo. What does that say? Cries for someone, is sad to see someone go. Begs someone with tears. Who had been slain. Opowaga na inipayami. Sometimes I'm like, why didn't they say Opowaga na ga nipayami? Would it mean something different? Maybe it doesn't matter. There's subtleties and nuances in the language sometimes that as learners, I don't pick up, as a learner, I don't pick up on. Slowly. Asai na keitato ay tsik. Umsi toyo war skinny go. Tante ego te itage, which I would say is itagwe. I don't really hear itage. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say it that way. Itage. Mostly I hear itagwe. But it means the same thing. Tate itage ga utinawak mikwanak e miastik nipissa kitotso sitayan. Nipissa. Oh, okay. No, it's not nipsisa. I don't think that's what it is. What does it say? To make my arrows. Nipissa. Huh. Interesting. Utinawak, to get feathers. Nice looking feathers. Nipissa. I don't really know that word. But I guess it means arrows. Sitan. In this context sort of means like with. Migwanak is feathers. Migwanak. I wonder if there's. Sometimes I always misspell it because I put an H in there, but it's. Ositayan. Oteo maga asiniwatsi wik. Egote mistehe. Miasuak mikwanak. So the ga, we were talking about ga and ka. So the ga in this context is attached to ote in terms of context. Over here, where? Here, where? Or ote, like over here they're saying yonder. Ote oma. The oma in this context is sort of like, in fact, I guess. Factive, they call that, like ote oma. Man, it's hard to explain that in English. It's just like it's focusing. Ote. Ote and the ga are connected over where it's rocky. The rocky hills, I guess, or in this they're saying the rocky cliffs. Egote miste miasuak miguanak. There are good-looking feathers over there. Egote nga otitahao. Oh, itotahao. I read that totally wrong. Itotahao. Yeah. Itoeo awa kiseenu. I will take him. Yeah. Yeah. Queen Bee. Oh, Jared says, like a willow? I kind of thought that too, but I would assume Nipsisa. Yeah, it's probably related, but it could be a typo. It could be, because these texts are, again, they're old. Like these were recorded in 1925. So lots of, there's quite a few like words and stuff that maybe we just might not hear all the time, or again, they've been converted a few times, so it also could be a typo. Yeah. Queen Bee says, over there, he is further. Yeah. Nipsisa is like a plant or stick or something. So basically like a stick, right? Basically like a stick. Jared says, what are they made of? It's hard to describe an arrow. Well, the word I know for arrow is, isn't it atsosis? Or is that? Yeah, this is the word I usually hear for arrow. Atsosis. Atos. Mukomanatos. Like a broadhead arrow. I think that's atsosis. Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah. Jason says, how did you learn to talk by language? Mananto niya. Through a lot of hard work. This is Nihiwe. This is my grandmother's language too, eh? Her first language was Nihiwe. Yeah, so I started this learning about 7 years ago. Yeah. Through lots of study, lots of listening, and lots of practice. All of the above. Every way in which you think it might be useful to learn an indigenous language is probably the right way. Let's keep going. Tapwe sa puetaheo, se puetaheo. Egoteese, in that direction. He they took them in that direction. Eg segote e tagotahat. Piesua e oatsistwanit, where the birds had their nests, I guess. The dictionary I'm using is called Itoewana. This is from the U of A. The language lab. I think it's led by Dr. Antti Arpi. Arpi? Not sure if I'm saying his last name right. But this is they used to call it the Smart Dictionary, but it's just called Itoewana now. And I know they're doing some work on other dialects and I think even languages for something similar, but yeah, this is the one we use. I am from Alberta. I grew up in Treaty 6 territory out by Rocky Mountain House. Jared Lee had Cree class with Derek Rabbitskin last night. Yeah, sin, that would have been good. Is he doing that online or is it just Derek's from Big Stone, right? No, Big River? Shit, he told me too. Which one's in Saskatchewan? Big River? I think it's Big River. Yeah. Yeah, the dictionary from U of A is nice because if you have a word, like if we take like this one, Getotsositayan, right? It's not just one word. If you put it in there, it can most of the time figure out what word you're talking about, so it knows that Eositayan comes from Ositao. They use the third person form for like the dictionary entry. But then you can also go further in there and like it'll build out all of the different what they call conjugations, I guess. Conjugations or inflections, they call that sometimes. All the different ways you can say a word. It doesn't have, and it doesn't have all of them, but there's a lot of them, right? So there's a past, present, the future. That's the ga we're talking about. The infinitive, which is also ga, but in the conjunct. Conditional. They don't have the, and then the command forms. Osi, ta, which I don't know if you could say that, I guess, like make it. Otsita, kan, like make it later. Yeah, so it's pretty good. It's a very useful resource. Holy gaya sa spin ay wap makawa. Gaya sa spin ay bies tago sin na waya shinizzle stagatsuma. Oh, comments are going a little fast here. Tisqua. I gotta get caught up. So Jason says from Northern Alberta Treaty 8. Miasin. Miasin inagskata napio. Jared. Derek's class was both in person, both online and in person. Miasin. That'd have been good. I didn't know Derek was teaching. He must have just fired that up. That's really good. The more classes, the better. The more exposure, the better for folks. That's awesome. Queen Bee. Missipostagok? Hope I'm saying that right. Missipostagok. Otinia. Nina. Inanimuin. I love the sound of N dialect. It sounds so cool. But it's the most out of between Y, TH, and N dialect changes the sounds of the word. Like if you learn Y dialect and then you hear a TH dialect speaker, you have to listen. Like for me anyway, you listen a little bit and it's like, oh, okay, I can make out what they're saying. But N dialect, because the Y changes to an N sound, it changes the sound of the word enough that I really struggle. but it's cool. I like the way N dialect sounds. Yeah. Grand Rapids, N dialect. It's hard to hear the Y sometimes. Yeah. And then there's L dialect too, right? Nia, Nina, Neither, Nira, Nila. I think. I've never heard anyone say that, but I've been told that it's a thing. Yeah, Nila. Which is interesting. And then there's another Y dialect way out east. Which is like it's Y dialect, but it's different. Really super interesting. Okay, let's keep going a little bit. Tapoy miasin miasin umagatago siniek. Nananas ko mo na nagskatagok. Tapoy. Let's do a little bit more. We're just kind of hanging out. I do just a language study on Wednesday nights. And then we do transcribing fluent speakers on Sunday. So come back for that. All right, we got a bit yet. Let's keep going. Hiya. Ego tenga ito taha. We got through that. Tapos sepueta heo ego te se egsi ego ta itago tahat. Piesua eo what's 20th. Where the bird nests, where the birds had nests. How? Nipuagantik. That tick ending is like you can address people. I've heard some people say that it's kind of a lost form, but I do hear it. Like Wes uses that. I've even heard like nitoa simtik, uh, nitotemtik, nawagamagantik. I In that one story, Wes said isquaistik, right? So it's like when you address someone, it's like well, they call it evocative, but I wonder if it's like a little more formal, maybe. Queen Bee says, "Can I ask did for teaching Cree? I really want to learn back my language. I I get real nervous when people use that word teach, because I don't. We're here together. We're learning together. We're just holding space for language. Everybody's welcome here. Maga moin yo giskano hamag. I Giskanohamagan. I don't teach the language, or I pass on what I've been told, but I'm not a teacher. Yeah, it's like plural, addressing someone in plural. Like I, uh, I hear people sometimes when people will address their friends, they'll say, "Ahaw, nitote mak." I've heard that, but that's like other areas. The way I hear that, where I learned, I hear, "Ahaw, nitotemtik." You're addressing them more than one person in sort of a formal way almost. Nawakamagantik. Right? And I've heard both. How nawakamaganak. I've heard that too. But the way I was taught or told was that plural, what they call advocative. Nawakamagan. Oh, kakyukitamskat now totemtik nawakamagantik. Right? It feels kind of formal maybe. But I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard it in other ways too. I've even heard not in a like in terms of addressing someone. Like, have you ever heard that when somebody say wastik, right? Like it's a was, but it's plural. I heard someone say that to a bowl of soup one time. Wastik. And I've even heard it as like to mean like let's go. Egwatik. Egwatik. Heard it that way too. I don't know if those are in the. I don't know if you can find those. How would you even awastik? Yeah, it's in there. But it's kind of it. But I think it's kind of like plural. Like you would only say that to multiple things, I guess. Jared says slang too for like, yeah, get out. Yeah, awastik. And the other one, egwatik, which is like, let's go. Or get going. It's kind of, yeah, okay, let's go. Egwatik. I don't know if it's necessarily plural, because I've heard people say egwa. Egwa. Like, commence, I guess. I don't know how you would interpret that. Okay. So there it is. Nipuagantik. My dream spirits, I guess. Dream guardians, it says. Eogoa na. Kita something. Oh, wow. Feeding this, I feed this one to you, Teo, he told them. Said to them, I guess. Hegse sigi weo. Asami nakakio nipa heo o he piesi sa. Oh, sorry, piesua. The thunderers, not just birds. Hegse isigit weo, es isigi weo. Hegse isigi. With that, he turned to go home. Just like my brain's like, why is isse in there? It's interesting. Okay, we'll keep going. Asai mina tate etage. That always it confuses me when there's no W in there, because again, I usually hear etage, etage. Tate etage ngagi o nain nipsi e miwa sik kita osi hak. Huh. Interesting. Exercise nagsenu. Go totahao tega miasini iknipsia. So once again, I'll take that old man to the place where the willows are good, I guess. Tapue totaheo. Saimi na nepawa ganeo go kita samtin iteo. Misikanepikwa. Oh, once again I feed you, I guess. This one I feed to you, he said to a great serpent. Saimi no awa uskini guga some meat. So there's that ga again, the one who was fed, but because of this one, some meat. I kind of call that like a long M, because you don't always hear that I in the middle. They spell it that way for a reason, because it has a meaning in terms of the context. But when you hear that in speech, it would sound like some meat. And if you're as a learner not being used to that, what they call that obviate form, it can be a little bit confusing. But anyway, there's that God, the one who had been fed, I guess. To whom he was being fed in this context. Let me just dig into that. Misikanepik wa nipaheo. So asaimina wa uskinigu. Once again, that young man. Yes. So over here it says, to whom he was being fed. And that just seems implied to me. I wonder if it's interesting, because when I read that, ga sammi misikanepikwa, just sounds like the great serpent who was being fed, but I guess it's implied that it was the young man that was being fed to him. Ostagwaniu kiweta tao. Saimina kisenu na wai tago teo. Mawika teo mina upuagana. What was that word they said again? Well, this time they say to grieve, bemoaned. Bemoaned. Yeah. Misikine pek napawa ganito. My dream spirit, my guardian, I guess. Ego moya gigiske tam tanse ego kitagi ise kawat mat. Tagi ise nipahat. Po. Tagawat mat. I don't know that word. Kawat male. Let's go look it up. Freeze him, he says. Kawat male. Freeze someone to prostration. Kawatemeo. I'm going to pull up Ben's site really quick here. Kawat. Okay, so that kawat part means like freeze or cold. Oh, like kawatin. Okay, so that'd be the diminutive. Kawatin. Kawatsian. Interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Kitagi is kawatemat. So here we go. The good example, because we were talking about these different ka, ta, kita, and then kika is another one. And actually in the books I see tita sometimes. These are probably the most common, but Wes uses this one, kika, kika. But here we've got two of them in the same sentence. So kita, and then just ta on this one. and then just ta on this one. So he didn't know moigig skatem danse how then, or now I guess, to, well, it's got tagi. The gitagi is like could, I guess. How he would, in which way he would freeze him, how he could kill him, in which way he could kill him. But by freezing him, I guess. That's interesting. But really kind of surgerying the story a little bit. Even possibly. But that's like a really naive way of interpreting all of that, right? It's like a little bit too analytical, like when you put it all together into one sentence, right? Then this is how he could freeze him to death to kill him, but by freezing, right? Because all of those twos or coulds kind of live in the same context, I guess. That could be the tricky part, I think, as a learner, for me anyway. My challenge, or where I'm at with my learning, is like how, like, understanding the phrasing or the nuance within context, which I think only really comes from like just listening a lot and studying a lot, I guess. Megan says, do you currently have an app that teaches Cree? We have an app coming out right away that is going to be focused around Cree phrases. And we're just going into private beta with that right away, like in the next week or two. So in a couple months, we'll have that out. It's not just for Cree, though. It's going to be for any Indigenous language, to allow learners and mentors to sort of group together and exchange, focused around capturing audio and phrases. So I think it's like MAP. It's basically going to be like MAP, but it's going to allow a mentor or elder to answer a question once. So the problem we have on Facebook right now, or something like that, is like somebody asks a question, you get a whole bunch of answers. They usually don't have audio. They're usually written in various writing systems. And then it disappears in Facebook and you never see it again. And then you go search Facebook and you can't find it, right? So that's kind of fixing that problem. But when somebody answers the question, they're required to provide audio with it. So then as a learner, you can build playlists of the phrases that you're trying to learn. So that's a learning style that I have, where I try to say things in the house day to day. I try to replace my sentences in English with the language, and it's hard, but the idea behind this is that you can have a playlist or something, and if you can't find it, then you can go search, or you can ask somebody. So yeah, we should have that out we'll have this out in the spring. Egwa omsi toyo. Matsi tan nite kwa iteo. My nephew, let us hunt. Let's go hunting, he told him. Tapwe matsiwak e tipskayak iegok. Nepahewak muswa. So this one, what's interesting about this is, instead of saying a tipiskag, which would still mean, when it was evening, a tipskayak, and the way Wes explained that yik on the ending means that the evening was being experienced by those ones we're talking about, right? The people who were hunting. And I guess iegok in this context, which sort of means like sufficient, to that extent, so much so. But in this context, I think it just means like when it was dark. At nightfall, no sooner, I guess. I guess that's what the iegok means, sort of like when it was dark. Nipahewak moose wa, they killed a moose. Wa pagota nipa ta nipaya. Kimese Big word. Tiskwa. Kawata wata pawanao. Holy, big word. Nano, wanano, pawanano. Kawata pawanano. I don't know this one. We are soaked through to the bone. That's an interesting word. Let's go look it up. No. Kawata. Let's just see if we can find a piece of it. Go to Ben's site. No. Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting. Another interesting word. Gisupamispuniyu. So I'm assuming it was a warm weather snowstorm. So gisupam, the gisup part is like the warm part, and then mispun is the snow part. Gisup. Thank you. Gisupwe, I guess. Warm weather snowstorm. Cool word. Gisupamispuniyu. And again, that EU part is similar to that yik, meaning or implying, I guess, that it was being experienced by them. Right? Pase, tan. Kitawin sinuwa. Tongue twister. Tiskwa. Kitayuin sinua. Kitayuin sinua. Ayunis. Ayuinsa. Ayuinis. Ayuinisa. Ayuinis is like a piece of clothing, I guess. The way I usually hear this is like in a command, like in a word, like a verb, like postayuinse, like put some clothes on. If you say to your kids, hey, like get dressed, postayuinse. But this one, like our clothes, our collective clothing, I guess. Kitayuin sinua. Kitayuin sinua. It's a tongue twister. Pase, tan, let's dry it. Dry them, I guess. Tapwe pasamwak. Mitanimiste punahakik. Minaikuskak. On the island? Oh, Cedar Grove. Oh, Menaikos. Interesting. Oh, okay. Where there was a cluster of Menaikoses, I guess. Mayoigiskea mat. Onaha kisima. E nipayit. Otinamweo. There's that word again. Yeah, it's not otinamweo, it's otinamweo. It's that relational form. Otayuin siua. Gagi agotayit. Gakyo. Mesti kasamweo. And you know what's interesting? I'm going to actually do a quick look on Ben's site here. Because I know there's a paper out there I read a while ago about that relational form. But I only heard the one, like, Nitotenin, I take something. Nitotenamwan, I think was the example. I take something of someone else's, like the wan part means that it belonged to someone else. Not necessarily just that I took it from them, but I took something that was someone else's or related to something else. So this is that, again, I think this is one of those ones where I don't know that this is... I see Marie is here. Tansi Marie. Does that make sense to you, that otinamweo? It's one of those forms that I wonder if it's not used everywhere anymore. And we'll look for amweo, words that end in that. Amweo. And that's not really, didn't really give me what I wanted. There. Gemma says, Marie says, yeah, they took I Gemma says, Tanse, what was your intention with learning the language? Are you indigenous? I'm Métis, so my name is Aaron Faye. I'm from Treaty 6 territory. I grew up by Rocky Mountain House. I'm a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. My grandma was from the Willow Bunch community in Saskatchewan. She grew up, or she was born in Willow Bunch. There was a Métis community out there, and the Cree language was her first language. But she never spoke it to us when, like, she didn't talk about any of that. I didn't find that out till later. Um, yeah, so I started learning the language when I was 40. And my kids are Métis and Seal, so my wife is Seal and Métis. Her family's from northern Alberta. The Métis, her dad, Lamberts, and her mom's family was from out here. But so my intention is that my kids, when they realize they're interested in language, that they have a head start. And as much as I talk about speaking language in the house every day, it is hard, right? And I catch myself thinking about that, like how much English I use in the house. And I'm at an interesting place in my language journey where I have lots of language, but it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever learned something and you feel like you're getting somewhere, and then have you ever had that experience where you feel like whatever you were doing started getting worse? Like they always say, like, oh, it gets a little bit worse before it gets better, and I feel like I'm in that getting worse phase where, like, my brain is rewiring a little bit or something, and yeah, so sometimes it's hard to get the words out of my mouth fast enough. Right? Marie says thinking in our language is also hard. I've heard that too. I know there's another fluent speaker in Edmonton I've talked to that he said he was working. He said I spend so much time working with like white people and in English. He said I'm starting to think in English, right? And he said it scared him. That he's like, I'm thinking in English now. That's how much I'm around. It's like we're basically in English immersion all the time, right? Gemma says, I'm from Treaty 6 territory, 2 Willow Cree people. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Starting my own journey too. It's hard to learn, but I'm determined. Tapoya, kamemo, miasin. So I always tell people, like, I don't teach Cree. I'm just a language learner, but I do this work. This was part of a commitment, but it's also part of my journey, because it's not just, I don't teach, but when people show up to my live and we have these conversations, and we're learning together, eh? We're keeping each other accountable for our language journey. So all of the work that I do came out of a trip I did a few years ago, where we had a conversation about how do we get more people language learning. And so the idea of just like, so the little bits of content that I do are just reminders, your language is here. Don't forget. Because it's life is pulling you, distracting you, the Western world and the colonial world is pulling you in all of these different directions, eh? Keeping us busy with all of these things, right? And then so it can be really hard or easy to forget even, that there's language work that needs to be done. So how do we create more opportunities for people to be working on language, even in maybe it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something that they have to do it. So that's what this is. So thank you for showing up, Gemma, because you help keep me going too. This says, I got a couple messages. My syllabics are Manu Min, it looks like. Manu Min. Dancy Manu Min, I think you've been here before, haven't you? Manu Min is like Manumna's wild rice. Dansigia mio tagosin tapwe. Just finished first semester for Cree 100. Starting Cree 101. Mia sinanma. It's quite the journey, slowly understanding the sentence structures. It takes time, but I mean, we were just talking about that tonight, 7 years in, and I'm like, looking at a sentence, I'm like, that sentence doesn't make sense to me, but we'll just keep going. like Dory, the just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Lorna, Dancer Lorna, aya mia sin ai hai. Lorna Saddleback says, Otinum will is that it's being taken away, but if you say Otinumaweo, that means you're taking it for them. Yeah, okay, mia sin Otinumweo. And the way that you're taking it, you're taking something, somebody's something, right? You're taking something specific. Like, does it belong to someone else, or is it beside something? Or the implication, I think, of that was that it was related to something, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, interesting word. That one's not in the dictionary, which is interesting, because I thought it would have been Otinamweo. Okay, we'll keep going. So he took his clothes anyway. Gagi agutayit that he'd hung up. Gakyo meisti kasamweo. And he burned them. Ha ha! The plot thickens. That's an interesting word. All of the words, like when you start learning, there's all these different words. Oh, and there's that weo again. So again, this is a good example, right? Meisti kasam, burns something. Meisti kasamweo, to burn something for someone. But this story was Meisti kasamweo, he burned the other person's things. So it's a little bit more, it's a little more subtle difference, I guess I'll say. Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's weird they don't have those ones in the dictionary, because they're all over this story. Hey, Kiwai got, again, there's a typo. That should be Kiwai. And I would read this as Kiwai. Kiwai ga saskiteg. There's that ga again. In this context, kind of means that or which. What is it that is burning? Right? We don't have to say that or which. We can just say, what's burning? But it is sort of the way been reading this book by Claire Cook, and the way she sort of explains that is like ga is used. It's if I said that to you, we both know something is burning, but we don't know what it is. You could also say uma. What is it that is burning? They've burned, your clothes have burned up. Ah, isk. Kiwikakwe nipahin. Itap ga musuwin. Itoa uskinigu. This is a really interesting word. I'm gonna become a moose, basically. This is in another story with Usagi too in this collection. Aisk, which I understand as because, but they said of course. Because of, for. Interesting. The interpretation here is, of course you are trying to kill me. You're gonna try and kill me. Itap, later. Gamusuwin. So there's this really cool thing that you can do. There's this really cool construction you can do. Right? I don't know if you would say this, but basically the form is this. Woo. Okay? And so you see this in some words. I'm going to try and pick a word that doesn't have any fancy rules, but like, you wouldn't say this. It seems silly, but I'll do it. So I'll take the word muhkuman. Mukuman, which is a knife. This is a nonsensical construction I'm making, so it doesn't make sense. But if I take this uwu, this is what they call a noun, okay? It's a thing, it's something. And if I said mukumanuwu, now I've turned this into a verb, and I'm saying that one is a knife. Like, I'm literally saying that they're a knife. That one is a knife. Now, there's this thing that happens. You don't always. This sound can sort of smush in with the other sounds. So, for instance, if we take a word like na peo, okay, which is like maybe a man or brave or something, okay, and we add oo at the end, that first I, that I sound at the beginning is just going to get gobbled up by this, the long vowel at the end of that word. So what we end up with is na peu. That one is a man, or that one is a brave. Something like that. Brave is probably not used as much today. And so that's what's happening with, we have muswa. Some regions will say musa, I guess, which I've only heard from one place, but we say muswa, which is that's a moose, obviously. But if you want to say that one is a moose, then you can say, actually what happens is that turns into an O, and you end up with this. Pretty sure, let me check, see if I've got that right. Yeah, musu, that one is a moose. And actually there's a lot going on here because the W's aren't really W's in Nihuan, like they're not like an English W, they're more like an O. So if you think of this as an O, but you pronounce it like an O, like oh, like shook or book, and you say moose, o, musua, musua. It's not really a W, but we write it that way because it's convenient, I guess. But it really is more like an O. It's like a rounding of the lips. So then that W is what's gobbling that I when we add that construction. Yeah, that's how that works. So it's just this cool thing that like means is something. That one is something. Kita musu yan. As I become going to be a moose. Kamusuin. Ito yo. Awo skinny go. Nito meo ete sipui te tawaga nu kissin wa. Tapoy mistake is now. I just wanted to, as I read that sentence, I didn't understand it. So he invited something. As he began to leave that old man, he invited gisin. I guess it means the cold. Gisin, like, but as a noun and as a yeah. I'm not gonna try not to rip these old. The more you get into fluid speech, the less the rules are really rules. It's just like, if you're fluent, you can just kind of say whatever you want. So try not to ruleify things too much because it's not really, it's helpful to a degree, but not always. Tapoy mistake is now. So it was really cold. Aisk nito meo. See, I understand this is because, but in this context, it doesn't really mean because. For he had called it. Well, because he had called it, I guess, maybe, for he had called it. Hegwa wo skinny go gi. So that young man went home. Asiskoyo osa. We ran into that word again. Oh, outdistance. To walk away from someone. Musu. He was a moose. Egi wait. As he went home. Egotane ke tekwiwa. Which I interpret as like, why are you a moose? Why thus? Yeah, it's weird. Itik is like the opposite of iteo. Iteo, that one asked someone. Itik, that other one asked them back. I guess you want to think of it that way. Go tawi wikakoy nipahit. Your dad's trying to kill me. Kakyo nitayo insa. Ki may stih kasam. Ki may stih kasam. He burned up all my clothes. I wonder if you could say... That's an interesting word. I have to try and remember that one. Okay, keep going. Tego date. Awagaseyanu. This is another... Well, they call that initial change, but I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means. Tego te tawagaseyanu. I guess when the old man arrived, apiwa onahakisima. Nahakisima. Interesting. Ki kameko tansa. Upbraided. What does that mean? Ki kameo. Scold someone. Interesting. His daughters upbraided him. Daniki mina Kau may stih ka somewhat. So there's must may stih ka somewhat. There's that relational again. Kiti kwatim utayawinsa. Oh, interesting. Your nephew's clothes. How come you burned up his clothes? Itikutansa. And the O comes from uche, which means with, for, because, is kind of how I think of it. It's like a short version of that. With, for, from. Uche can mean so many things. With, from, for, with, because. Yeah, kind of depending on context. What book are you reading from? So this is, let's go back there. I wonder if you can find it this way. Bloomfield Online. That is a totally different thing. If you search for Bloomfield Online, it's not this one, but here, Bloomfield. Or you can go to my site, kiano.net. Kiano. You can just Google Kiano. Kiano. And it'll come up here at the top. Right there, Bloomfield's texts. Right, so if you go there, and the two texts, the Sacred Stories of the Sweetgrass Cree, were published in 1930, and this Plains Cree text in 1934. So we are reading this one, the Sacred Story 01, the birth of Wisagetzak and the origin of mankind. We started it on New Year's. That video is on my YouTube if you want to go back and get caught up. And I don't know if we're going to finish it tonight. We got a little ways to go, and we're kind of just taking our time, looking at some of the words and breaking them apart and talking about them and stuff. So I've read a few of these stories a few times, and it's interesting to come back and look at them again, or just, I think there's value if you have a book or something that you've read or you work through. There's obviously value in like reading it again and again or whatever, but especially something you've worked on. Go back 6 months from now and read it again and realize, just to help you realize how you're progressing. Because you'll look back, especially if you're working on it a lot, you'll look back and you'll be like, oh, I know all that stuff. Or I recognize those words. Or that part used to confuse me back then, but now it's a different part that's confusing me. It's nice to see progress. Dane Jimina. Oh, you know what we should do? I never even thought of that. Do I have a plug-in here? Had my phone plugged in. You know what we should do? Would be fun. Let's go to my site and let's pull up for funsies. Keanu, go to the learner library and I'm gonna look for wolf art, a grammatical study, because that one right there, where'd it go? Degotate, that initial change, I think he talks about that. I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't spend a whole bunch of time in papers and stuff, but I do believe in here somewhere he mentions what that means. So I'm going to see if I can find it. Initial change. Let's just see if we can find a really quick. It's described in detail in Appendix A7. You think that would be easy to find? Oh, not likely, right? Appendix, sample text. Oh, Appendix A7. Did I pass it already? We don't have to spend any time here. Just, oh, here it is. A2, 3, 4. I don't think I made it this far into the paper. Oh, here we are. Initial change is a systematic alternation of the first vowel whenever. It generally means whenever is his interpretation here. Like he's saying, Bimoteo, that person, sorry, this is really tiny. Bimoteo, that one walks along. Bemoteak, as we walked along. This isn't helping me at all. Dagoteo arrives. Degotetik, when they arrived. Is, yeah. I don't get it. I was hoping there would be something meaningful in here, but it's just another way to say it, I guess. In this context, they're saying it means when he arrived, I guess. Manuman says, what is your YouTube channel? I could definitely listen and understand. So if you go to my link in bio, if you're coming from TikTok, did I put it up here? This one. If you go to my link in bio, my TikTok profile, you'll see the link. It will bring you to my link tree. And down here, my YouTube channel is the second one. So you can find our Sweetgrass Stories project at the top, and then you can find my YouTube channel and all my lives. We're live streaming on YouTube right now, and you can just go back in the live tab and go back and see all of the old streams. Yep. And I'm thinking I need to go organize those a little better because they mostly just say live stream, but like we're always working on different stuff. So let's do a little bit more here. We got a little bit more time. We did that. How come you're trying to kill? No. Why did you burn up your nephew's clothes? Ha! Egisque quasian et tueo awakesenu. Kisque quasian. Huh, interesting. That's an interesting word. That quas part right here kind of means... Yeah, I think that's the part that means sleeping. He says, I was walking in my sleep. Let's go see... Quisque quasu. Quisque quasu. That's really interesting. Because if we look up quisque, doesn't that have to do with being... No te quase. Yeah, like to want sleep. Dorothy says, like no te quase, which is like to be sleepy, right? If you're tired. No te quasin. Let's check out quisque. Oh, not there. It's got to be here. Yeah, because I thought this one had to do with like, well, I guess in some contexts it means to sleep, talk, sleepwalk, or to be crazy. Oh yeah, I'm meant to be drunk. This is a highly productive morpheme. But that's interesting. So there's some common meaning between all of those having to do with geese, squay, like maybe it has to be like to be in a state that's not normal or something. Because this part, it's the bay part that means alcohol. So it's like almost to, or to be a drink, to be not in a normal state because of drink. And this one here, that gisque kwasu is like to not be in a normal sleep state. So maybe that would imply sleepwalking. That's really interesting. Really interesting word. Yeah. Danse Dorothy. Dorothy Thunder Tagosin. Miasan. I was sleepwalking, said the old man. Ah, matipegwa wasai mina te tamuwagasea no. Nina, oh, tongue twister. Ninaha Kasim, which is my son-in-law, I guess. Mati matzi tan. Matipegwa wasai mina. This is one of those contexts where it's like there's a whole bunch of. It's implied. Let me try once more. Ete tam, he thought. Son-in-law. Let's go hunting, he said. Tapwe matzi wak, so they went. Accordingly, I guess. Moitagi giwe ya. Eteo sa saimina. So the interpretation here is now shall not. But I guess I think, won't be able to, I guess. Because again, that tagi will be like could, would, should, I guess, depending on the context. We won't be able to go home. That's the way I interpret that. So when it was dark again, they killed a moose. Not before nightfall. He phrased that differently twice. That's interesting. Yeah, that iagok is like when it was thoroughly dark. Auntie, Tanse Auntie asks, is that a jussive? I don't understand that word. What does that mean, jussive? Like thou shall. I don't think I understand what that means. As in, let there be light. Do you mean the tagi part? Let them eat cake? I'm not sure. I think there's a nuance in what you're asking that I don't fully understand. Jussive. I've never heard that word before. I don't. Skip the AI part. Of a form of verb expressing a command. Oh, I think depending on the context. Like, I think it could be like if you just said out of the blue, and again, it depends on the context. So if it's like out of the blue context, tagimitsoyin, if I just said that, tagimitsoyin, that would mean like you should eat. But if I said, moy tagimitsoyan, I'm not able, I couldn't eat or I'm not able to eat, I guess. What you're talking about, like let the force be with you, the way I understand that one I think would be more like this. I think that gawi, Like Gawi Mio Dipskeen. Gawi Mio Dipskeen. Like, which is like, have a happy birthday. I guess. May you have a happy birthday, maybe, or something like that. I think that's a little bit closer to what you're talking about. Let the force be with you. Yeah, I don't know. But in terms of tagi, it can be like kitagi or something like that, or gagi, could, should, maybe would, could, should, which was confusing the first time I heard it, because I'm like, well, how do you differentiate between could and should? And it's like, well, the context sort of does. Like, again, if I said, I don't know if you'd say this to Nipayan, like, out of the blue, Tanipayan probably still means you should go to bed. But if we're analyzing this, like, sort of from a learner perspective, it sort of means like for you to go to bed. But if somebody said, or sleep, sorry, for you to go to sleep, for you to sleep. If somebody said, Taginipayan, you should sleep. Taginipayan, kaginipayan. Yeah, something like that. Nishnabe when Auntie says, we'd say, Kika minawanigos. Minawanigos. Kika. Interesting. Super interesting. Let's do a little bit more. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Again, it's one of those ones where, like, I've said it this way, and then we'll run into a context where it's used where it doesn't mean should, maybe, or it'll run into a context where I'm like, now I don't understand what it means. Because again, these concepts don't translate directly into English. And that's the tricky part I'm finding as an intermediate learner, is like, and you know what, elders say this all the time, fluent speakers say this all the time, like, if you've ever heard that about, like, thinking in the language, about you just have to think, right? It's like, because it literally is a different way of thinking. The words don't translate directly necessarily. And even myself, and my wife does this too, when she's talking about stuff in her languages, you know, we say, well, what does this mean? Or somebody will say something like, what does that mean? And sometimes we'll say, like, I don't know how to explain this in English. I understand what it means. I know what it means. I know how to use this. I know how to say this. I don't know how to explain it in English. It's because English it just doesn't translate well. Auntie Nay says the meaning is in the pattern, not exactly. It's in the pattern. It's in the context. It's in the relationships to all of those pieces, right? And English doesn't have the words for those things lots of times, because the world views aren't compatible in a lot of ways. How would Reuben Quinn would say, they are diametrically opposed sometimes. Ramona says, I am Bush Cree from northern Saskatchewan, raised in the city. I get some Cree, but not all. Larange, from Larange. Miasin, Ahkameamo. Ahkamedamo, I think you say that in TH. Yeah. Ahkamenamo, Ahkamedamo, Ahkameamo. Yeah. Let's do a tiny bit more, and then I'm getting close to the end of my stream here. This has been good tonight. I like taking the time and going through the pieces and having little questions. Just a nice amount of people and a nice amount of questions. Manumin says, isn't the language more like a feeling than a translation? and like a sense or an understanding, I guess you'd say. I don't know. It's one of those things that's hard to articulate. And it's one of the reasons when I transcribe that I don't really translate. And I don't even like that word translate. I prefer the word interpret, like an interpretation, because that leaves it a little bit more open to the idea that it's not necessarily accurate, or if you got two interpretations from two different people, they might be slightly different, which is really true in my experience, right? Like if you were to do an interpretation of a classical song or an interpretation of a piece of art or something, it's like that's your interpretation. Whereas if you just say translate, that feels more definitive, and there's in my experience, there's nothing really definitive about English translations of indigenous languages. That's just been my experience though. Yeah. So I prefer the word interpretation. Let's do a little bit more. Kiam ga kape sinano. Let me think before I look over the English. I want to think about this. Kiam is one of those words. It's like if you just learned kiam on its own, it's like whatever. But I'm like kiam ga kape sinano. It almost seems like it doesn't matter where we camp. We could camp anywhere, maybe. What does it say? Well, it just says let us camp. Here I was reading it. Just let us camp. Like let's just do it. This is one kape sinano. When we write this in SRO, and this is very close. Oops. But when you write it in SRO, there's actually a g in there that you don't really hear. Just usually in this specific form. If it's like g, like us kiano, or you kia, I don't hear gi ka. I don't hear gi ka in this one, in this particular context. It's just implied. No, us kiano. And it's just, I think it's probably just because it's easier to say. It's just like fossilized that way. Antine says, this is definitely adjussive. Let us camp. Let the force be with us at our campsite. Dalton says, who cares? We're just going to sleep here. Yeah, it's kind of like, let's just camp. The interpretation over here was a little disappointing for all the build-up that I did. No. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. There's this other thing that happens too, is there's actually two ways to say this, because this is the VAI form, and it's sort of the 2-1P, or sometimes you'll see the 1-2P. It just means kiano. It's all of us. Okay, kiano. Right? But there's two ways to say this. Sometimes that nan won't necessarily be in there. Kakapesano. That's another way you could say that. Kakapesano or kakapesanano. Right? And that's just, I've heard speakers use both, like use one and then use the other later. Like, so I think it's one of those things that I think you just phrase it the way that seems right. Like, it's just like, that's the way you say it. Kapase na no, there it is again, that na no. Kapase, and he said ka. Here, he didn't hear, he said just ka, and now it's ka, which is weird. So again, I wouldn't probably hear the g on the front. Kitayu win sinua. Kitayu win sinua. Geek. Egsinga kakwe snipa how? In our house? No, in spite of all. What? Geek. Nevertheless, in spite of all, despite it all. Interesting. Egsinga kakwe snipa how? Iteta kawakasenu. Huh. Interesting. Geek. I don't know if I've ever heard that before. The this way, that's the is. But when I saw that, I was like, that's what I thought. But then I'm like, well, in what way? Like, he hasn't really made it clear what the way is in which he wants to kill him. Egwa agotawak. Egi punahkik. Otawais. Otayuin suawa. That gets tricky with nouns and the different possessive forms, or like the different people, because it gets tongue twistery, especially with those win or winnis. Otayuin suawa. Otayuin suawa. Tongue twister. Yeah, that's what I thought too. But I think that would be, Robbie says, Geek is our home, but I think it's Kigik. Kigik would be our home. Geek, in our home. Geek. Let me look that up again. Yeah, there's a very slight difference there in that aspiration. So not geek, it's geek. There's that aspiration in there. And I've never heard that before. That's interesting. Geek. And sometimes those are very subtle. Depending on the speaker, they can be very subtle. For instance, tap skutso niso tuyo na mana papita man mana piakoma utena. Ego takuma uhtena. Ego mai utena. Oma etoy magak mana take it gagayasimo. Maga uta uhtena. Take it from there, I guess you'd say. So there's subtle difference, eh? I just think it's a different word that sounds, I think this is like an older word that has that aspiration in there. Geek is in your home. Geek, nevertheless, in spite of. Yeah. But that's what I thought when I first read that too, was like, in your home. But if he's thinking it, who would he say that to? Wouldn't make sense. Right, in this context, that makes sense, because he's thinking this, he's saying, I'll kill him in this way. The old man thought to himself, but would he say, in your home? Or maybe you say, like, if you were talking to yourself, you could say, in your home. The interpretation here says, in spite of all. And also the dictionary says the same thing. So I have to trust that that's accurate. Egwa gotawak egi punahkik otayuin suawa. Hung them up. No, hung up their clothes. Gotawak. Egwa gotawak egi punahkik. When they had finished making the fire. This is a really interesting use of gi in this particular context, right? And it wasn't obvious at first, but they hung something up, which has to be the clothes. But the gi right here means they'd finished making the fire. So they hung them up after they finished making a fire, their clothes. But you wouldn't say it that way. You would say it this way. After making the fire, they hung up their clothes. Like, it's just really interesting the way you phrase something. It's like Mayo inipaye tawa uskinigu. Nicht nam kakyo utawayens. Utayuinsa. Utayuinsa. It's my tongue twister word right there. As soon as that old man was asleep, that young man, nicht nam, I don't know that word, took them down. Oh, that makes sense. Nitanam. Took them down. Lower something. Lift it down. That's cool. Took down all the clothes. Itaga nipa tastao. Where he put them where he was sleeping. Say in one scow, and that old man woke up. Pasagwa apu. Something to do about looking. Kunta egi sque quasi ka sut. There's that word that means to sleepwalk, but this part here, ka so, that means to pretend. Okay, so that says to me he pretended to sleepwalk. Pasagwa apu, I don't know that word though. Let's go look it up. He closed. He with his eyes closed, he, what does it say over here? He squinted from under his eyelids, pretending to walk in his sleep. We are saying you it. Gay saying you it. There's that initial change again. Gay tsuak o tayuin sa kakyo. Mesti kasam. What does it say over here? The old man himself burned up all his own clothes. Interesting. Just like such advanced phrasing. Just exactly near close to. Some of those words that just have like all of these different meanings, again, depending on the context that you use it in, right? So, hamaga, egotaga kisita no. We got a fair bit. We're not done this story yet. We're gonna have to come back to this next week. So we're on number 90. It's a long story. If you're just tuning in with us, we're reading this story from the Sacred Stories of the Sweetgrass Cree. You could find these online on my site. Let me get there. There we go. Kiano.net. You can go there. You can just search for that, Kiano, and my site should come up. You go to kiano.net and then the Bloomfield Online. And we're reading these stories. So in 1925, there was a linguist, Leonard Bloomfield. He went to Sweetgrass and he captured 1,800 pages of stories, and he published 2 books, Sacred Stories of the Sweetgrass Cree in 1930, Plains Cree Texts in 1934. There was a 3rd book that was unpublished. We have a copy of that, and we'll have it out there soon. We're working on it. But you can find these online. And then if you're just tuning in, we've also got a project from either my Facebook or TikTok. You can go to the link in my profile and find this project here, which is our attempt of a continuation of those stories from Sweetgrass. We're calling the project Sweetgrass Stories, a 21st Century Perspective. And Wes Fineday, the knowledge keeper here from Sweetgrass, his great-grandfather was one of the original storytellers for Bloomfield in that original collection. And so Wes has shared stories with us about some of these folks. Tapskutsawaya, Tigwayu, there's a story on YouTube about that one. There's a story about Coming Day. There's stories about Sweetgrass. So you can find those on YouTube, and as I get the time, I'll keep uploading more. I've got over 20 hours of stories from Wes so far in the language. And so this is just the first week. We're actually doing our 4th week of recording with him next week for the winter stories. So you can, if you're not tuned to that, subscribe to that YouTube channel, Sweetgrass Stories, a 21st Century Perspective. And we'll have these coming out as a we'll have these coming out as a podcast soon as well on the different platforms just to make it easier. Dorothy asks, are there rare words in the dictionaries? Sometimes. Sometimes they're not. Or it's not even just rare words. Sometimes it's the rare forms. I don't know if that counts for what you're looking for, Dorothy, but like we ran into that one. I know there's some areas that still use this, like, right? That Ottawa sis siwi tai, that tai, what the linguists call that HT preterite. I know there are some areas like Nimisawa, they still use this in some parts of Saskatchewan, and I'm not saying that's the only place, but it's like, again, uncommon. It's not everywhere. And then there's some other ones that, stuff like that. But we've definitely run into a few words in here that aren't in the dictionary, which I don't know why, because the dictionaries largely were based off of these stories, from my understanding. There's another one. Which I guess, Mayo tai. Hardly had the youth gone into the brush. It's like, wow. I have to think about that more. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. We're going to leave it there tonight. Contemplative Camera GC7 on Twitch wants you to know that they're a spam bot. Before we shut down, let me know where you're tuning in from. We got a few folks on TikTok tonight and a few folks on Facebook, YouTube. Let me know where you're tuned in from. It's always cool to know where folks are listening in. And make sure and join us on Sunday. I will probably be in Edmonton on Sunday, but we'll do a transcribing stream anyway. And we're working on one of these stories from Wes. We're currently working on this one, Atsimuwin Peyak, which is actually I think there's 3 or 4 stories in there. But we work on, when we transcribe, we go through and we figure out every single word. What does every single word mean? Dorothy says, too funny. Yeah. Brandon from Rocky Boy, Miasin. Yeah, Cheryl from Regina. Oskanaga Sastegi. Larry lives in TikTok. Mother Ducker from Edson. Auntie Nays in Winnipeg. Treaty 1. Gina also from TikTok, Alberta. Jacksonville, Florida. Wow. Manu Min also Oskanaga Sastegi. Miasin. And Colin can't get an Uber. Teresa from Calgary. Miasin. Little Red River, Saskatchewan, says Ramona. Treaty 6. Ogimau Kunapeo. Miasin. Well, asay mina kakyo kitamskat now. Inanaskum tagok miasin miasinoma kape kyogo yeha nutsa miste miuetin mina inanaskumo yan tape atsimo, trying to say how we atsimo stato, yeah, we storied with each other. We did story time. So we're going to leave it at that. I'll start shutting streams off. Don't forget to tune in on Sunday and Wednesdays at the same time. Every week I go live. Wednesdays we do story and study, and Sundays we do transcribing. So we're going to leave it there tonight. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you on Sunday. Okay, muestas.